So let's move on in our document. So now we've created solid shapes. Now we're going to create shapes with just a stroke. So it's clear on the inside and a stroke on the outside. So we're going to just take our ellipse tool, and what we're going to do is we're going to remember to create a new layer, and we're going to type this stroke circle. And we're going to say solid because this is going to be a solid stroke. And I want this to be a perfect circle, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key, click and drag, and I'm going to be able to get a perfectly dimensional circle. I want to reduce the opacity so I can kind of make sure I match this stroke. And I'm going to go ahead and move this. Just get the Move tool, move it over. So now what I want to do is I want to be able to make this is a solid fill. I want to turn it into a stroke. And there's something that's really, really important. This is a very important panel. It's called the Properties panel. And this is going to contain so many things that you can change, like fonts, colors of objects, and then you can even do stroke on here too. So this is the Properties panel. I'm going to bring this out so you can take a look at it. This is Properties panel. So with this selected, I have our circle selected. I'm going to go down here to there's a Appearance panel within this Properties panel, and it's going to have a fill, which is going to change the color of our fill, and also a stroke, which is going to add a little bit of a stroke. So let's say I add a blue stroke, and there's a stroke. So let me change the width or thickness of the stroke, just like that. And we'll do this again in Adobe Illustrator and the next software. This is kind of repeatable stuff, so don't feel worried if you're not getting all this. We're going to repeat it over and over and over again. So now let's say, okay, so let me go ahead and make this 100%, just in my layers panel, just making this 100% opacity. So here we are. I want to punch that orange stuff out. I want that to be clear. I just want to see the stroke. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our fill, which is this orange color or whatever color I want to make it, and I can go up here to null. This is called null or no color, and a little stripe has this little red kind of diagonal line across a white box. We're going to go ahead and click that, and it's going to create, basically make it nothing. So there's no fill, and then we have a stroke. And we can just change our stroke thickness to make it match a little bit better. And that's how you create a stroke. So I can go ahead and take my transform controls, hold down Shift and drag. There we go. Just kind of trying to match that as best as I can. I'm going to press enter, and there we go. We can always get our move tool, move this independently, and we have our stroke. So now we want to do the same thing, but we want to add these dots instead of a solid line. So what we're going to do, let me go ahead and drag these out here so we can kind of see, have more screen. I'm going to duplicate this, and there's several ways to duplicate a layer. You could do the traditional kind of longer way, and you can right click. This is our layer. You can always toggle visibility to see which one it is. You can right click and duplicate layer, and it'll create a duplicate. Just click on OK, and it created a copy. So now I have two of these floating around, and I can go over here and add the dots. Or there is a couple of shortcuts. You can hold down the Option key or the Alt key if you are in a Windows, and the Option key is if you're in a Mac. And you can hold down that button, then click and drag, and you're able to create a duplicate. So it's just kind of a quicker way to create a duplicate. I do this over and over again in future lessons. You're going to probably get sick of me talking about it, but it's a great extra quick way to duplicate instead of having to right click and duplicate, or do just a copy and paste of the layer. So let's try that again. So I'm going to have this selected, hold down Option key or Alt key if you're on a Windows. I have that selected. I'm going to click and drag and release, and I have a little duplicate here. So now that we have the duplicate, let's go back into our Properties panel, and we're going to pull up Properties panel a lot, so it's nice to keep that handy. And I'm going to go to Stroke, and I'm going to go down to this Extra Options panel, and I'm just going to make it dots instead of a solid stroke. And now I can change the size, and it'll add more dot density around it. That's a pretty close match. You don't have to be perfect with this one. And we can even do our transform controls if we need to kind of move it around a little bit. You press enter. Let's move on. Let's go down here to the scaling shapes and using rounded corners. So anytime we create a new shape, if we want to be able to move it independently, we need to create a new layer. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to go ahead and click on new layer. So I have a new layer. This will be square. So let's go over here to our shapes tool. We had it on the ellipse tool. So let's just click, hold, and get a rectangle tool. And let's change the color here before. So you notice how we changed it in our properties panel when we selected an object. We can change it up here as well. And either way works. You can change your options here, or you can change it in the properties panel when you have an object selected. But we haven't created our object yet. So let's go up on the top and go ahead and set our colors. So let's say I don't want any of these recently used colors. This will load any colors I've used in the last couple of projects. I want to be able to pick on the hue slider, which we covered in the design theory lessons. To be able to load the hue slider, you're going to click right here on color picker, and it's going to load our little hue cube. So you have all of these different colors. Here's your hue, and here's your saturation. You know, we covered this a little bit in those lessons. So let's say I want to make it blue. So I'm going to slide my hue slider all the way up to the blue hue. Oh, maybe look a little more blue. Make it nice and highly saturated, and I'm going to click on OK. And it right now has a stroke. I don't want a stroke. I want to turn strokes off. So select stroke and make sure it's on null. So no stroke and a blue fill. Now we'll be able to create our rectangle. So let's go ahead and hold down Shift, and we already created our new layer. If we didn't create a new layer, it would put it on one of these other layers, and we won't have them as separate objects. So now I'm on a square layer, click, hold, drag, and I have a square. I'm going to take my move tool, and I can click anywhere off. Let's say I want to click on this, and I want to click anywhere off to deselect it. Just click anywhere off the artboard or on other objects to kind of deselect it. Let's say I want to click on something and automatically select that object I click on. If you notice that your Photoshop is not doing that, there's an option here called Auto Select. Make sure it's selected. If you unclicked Auto Select and I try to click on any of these layers, it's going to continue to select the layer that's selected. So you have to manually select the layer to move it. I like to be able to have Auto Select on to be able to click and drag and not have to select the layer and drag. But there are instances when you have a lot of things happening on your screen where turning Auto Select is nice, because then you can move the shape anywhere you want, no matter where you click, and you don't accidentally click something else. Don't worry, we'll be using that a lot in the future. So I have Auto Select on. So I went ahead and clicked my shape, so now I can move it around. I want to hold down Option and drag to create a copy. And I can scale this. So you see the transformed controls is clicked. So now I have this option to scale it. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking this transform box and moving it bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's it. I can select my move tool. I can deselect. And I can select it again if I want. And I'll hold down Option and drag. Or I can do it the long way. Right click, duplicate layer. When I duplicate layer, I don't have to create a new layer because it just automatically creates the layer. Move it over here. We're just going to slowly scale this bigger and bigger, and then hold down Option and drag again. And so now I want to do rounded corners. So I'm going to make this a little bit opaque, just in my layers. I'm going to go up to the corner, and I'm going to be able to click and drag this corner. And it's going to do all of them at the same time. Just keep continuing to drag, drag, drag until it matches it. You can at any time click these and make them bigger. Once again, we'll be going over a lot of these in Adobe Illustrator as well, because it's got a very similar function. Okay, so let's say we want to have more dramatic corners. I'm going to go ahead and hold down Option and drag, or Alt if you're on a Windows. And let's say I want to match and make this a circle. So let's make this a little transparent so we can see. And we can click and drag. We can even make it such rounded corners that it even turns into a circle. Look at that. I just wanted to kind of show you the option of rounded corners. So we're slowly working our way through this worksheet. We're going to be talking about layers. We've already done a lot of layer work, but this will be a good test for you just to make sure you know how to properly move and drag layers.